Hey everyone, my name is Zach. I'm a 23-year-old competitive boulderer from Canada, currently living in Montreal. Welcome back to the COMPCLIMB training series, where I record most of my training, provide in-depth analysis of every session, and just chat about climbing with an emphasis on competition. So here we are at Movement Climbing RiNo in Denver. So I guess in the last episode, we were climbing at Block Shop. And so between the last episode and this session we're having here, I had 2 days of rest where I obviously flew from Montreal down to Denver. And basically what we're going to be doing is for the next week and a half, I'm going to be training here in Denver as I prepare for the Vail North American Cup. And so the reason that we're training in Denver is simply because there aren't really any climbing gyms in Vail. And the reason that we're here in the US so early is to acclimate to the elevation, obviously, right? So Denver is is quite close to Vail, and it's also at elevation. It's definitely not as high as Vail is. I believe Vail is just under 9,000 feet elevation, and then Denver is 5,000. So it would be nice if we could acclimate at a bit more of a similar elevation to Vail, but this is definitely going to help out a whole lot. Spending like a week and a half training in Denver at 5,000 feet elevation to really get the body accustomed to having to perform with such thin air up here. And I have competed at Vail numerous times in the past, a couple times for the World Cup, and then once last year for the North American Cup. And so every time I go there, have competed there in the past, I have usually come and trained in Denver, and I never felt like I spent enough time here. Like every time I would go a little bit earlier than the last, but it still never felt like quite enough. And then on comp day in Vail, I always just got the wind knocked out of me. It was just so intense, especially on like the physical boulders that they usually set. So I said, okay, this time I'm gonna do it right. And now we're here like a week and a half early, which is definitely the earliest I've ever come here. And I think this is more than enough time to get a good level of fitness in and acclimating in. So I have trained at Movement Denver a few times in the past. This is usually the gym that I come to train leading up to Vail. And I've also been to like the Spot, which I think is also in Denver, if I'm not mistaken. And so this gym feels quite familiar, and I really like it here. I remember being left with the impression last year when I was training in this gym for a few sessions that they had a lot of good slab up, and like the gym just has a lot of slab walls, and the setters make a really good use of it. I really enjoy my slab sessions in this gym. Lots of cool creative movements and well-set boulders. And if you noticed from our little like highlight of the program at the beginning of the episode, our first session is a bit different than what we've been doing for the past few episodes. And that is because we are back to starting off day one of training with a slab and coordination session. So we're also basically moving into like the third phase of this program. If anyone recalls like the last big program breakdown I did, when I broke down like the full training plan for Vail, I was talking about how there's basically like 3 phases of it. And the first phase was like a bit of a higher volume. And then the second phase that we just finished was where we tried to get some performance training in. We were doing some 5-on 5-off comp simulations, as well as it being an endurance phase. So obviously we were doing some endurance to get our cardio systems stronger in preparation for the elevation. So anyway, we are now moving into the third training phase, which is the peaking phase. So this is where our sessions are going to be a little bit shorter. I want to always be feeling nice and fresh for every session that I do. I don't want to be tiring myself out. I don't want to be losing skin. And that is the idea with this training phase. And we're going to start off this day of training with a slab and coordination session just to get the body activated. I don't want to jump on boulders that are too physically intense right after the travel day and also getting used to the elevation. And then as we are trying this boulder here, we're going to jump into our tip of the day really quick because I think this boulder features a nice one. So for today's tip of the day, I want to talk about how we can optimize for hard close compression moves. So I am definitely a climber who is pretty weak at close compression moves, like where you really got to get your pecs involved and almost like your wrists a lot of the time and squeeze two holds together that are like uncomfortably close. And so a lot of the times when like there are bigger holds involved, a way that I like to try and turn this move that's normally a weakness of mine into something that's a bit more comfortable for me is to actually use like sort of open my hand and almost like use a palm sometimes, maybe sometimes even a full forearm. Obviously, as we're looking at this shot here, I'm sort of palming this hold, whereas I could be grabbing it straight on if I wanted to. But especially because this move, we have to sort of catch this position. It's a pretty tricky position to hold. And if I was to try and go and catch these two holds with just using like straight on grip, it's definitely gonna feel a lot harder for me because I'm weak at my close compression. But the reason that grabbing this left hand with my palm is gonna make this move feel easier for me is because you can take your hands right now and feel it for yourself. Like have your hands sort of at the same distance and now rotate this hand into just like a palm position like this. You can feel your shoulder sort of opening up. And basically what that does is, in theory, it almost widens the compression a bit because you're opening your shoulder and now you get a bit more of those stronger, more comfortable muscles involved in this movement. Whereas when we're trying to grab the sloper as straight on like this, you know, you don't get to open your shoulder as much because you got to sort of compress really close. So by just grabbing the hold slightly differently, I'm opening my shoulder and now I'm getting like a more sort of shoulder width compression feeling and just a more open, stronger compression style that like I find myself better at. And then, you know, like in theory, like the wider we would go, the more solid this move is going to be. So just by optimizing for this really small percentage of making the move feel like a little bit less of a close compression, it can help a lot of the times. So if you're someone who struggles with close compression moves, definitely look for these sorts of ways that you can grab holds differently in order to almost feel like you're opening your shoulders and getting a wider compression sensation. Now, this being said, you can't do this all the time. Like let's say you have some close compression on like some crimps or something, then there's nothing you can really do and you're just gonna have to deal with it. But when we have bigger holds like this, that is when this can come into play. And I guess I should also mention, before we continue with this session, the grading system and how it works here at this gym. So it's kind of by hold color as well as like the tag color. I think purple is the hardest circuit, and then blue is the step down below that. And I think throughout our sessions, we pretty much just stick to purple and blue boulders. And I found actually that the purple and blue circuits sort of mixed and mingled together a lot in terms of difficulty. And I was definitely finding there to be a few blues that proved a bit trickier than some of the purples, which I always personally enjoy. I like, especially when we're training on comp style boulders, I like the element of not being able to get a good gauge on the difficulty of a boulder, because that's exactly what happens in an actual competition. So as for this session and how it's going, I was very pleasantly surprised actually with how I was feeling on the wall in this first session. The first day of training that I had in Salt Lake City in preparation for the North American Cup, I actually didn't film it. We went to a different gym, and it was the first day, and I remember I just didn't film it because it was just trying to have it be like a super chill day. And in that both of those sessions that I had on day one, I just felt absolutely trash, like so bad. Not only did I feel out of breath, obviously because Salt Lake City is at elevation, but I also just felt like really messed up from the travel, really stiff, and that whole first day of training was just not pleasant. And then contrast that to this day of training, like both of these sessions that we're gonna have today were surprisingly good. And like, not only are we actually at a higher elevation here in Denver than we were in Salt Lake, which I would have expected that to like take a bigger toll on my body. But I also had 2 days of rest since our last session. And sometimes after having 2 days of rest, it'll take me a little bit to get going in a session and I won't feel so good off the bat. And I'll even feel like a little bit stiff. And you combine that with like just a tiring day of travel on a plane and whatnot. And I had to get up at like 4 a.m. to catch my flight or something. So anyway, all of these factors had me expecting to feel like garbage in this session, but I actually felt really nice. That being said, in this morning session, obviously I'm not doing really any physical boulders since it's our slab and coordination session. And that's also by design. It's so that I don't have to try physical boulders in not so good condition. But even like on the element, like there are definitely physical elements on a lot of these boulders that we're doing. And I felt like I could grab holds pretty well. My body like was moving really well on the wall. And I was just feeling really good overall in the session. And I was very pleased to have this be my starting point. And that just gives me a lot more confidence that I'm gonna just be in really, really good peaked shape by comp day. And so, yeah, we actually get to go have like a really nice session on all of these super cool slab boulders. Speaking of cool slab boulders, this one here was definitely top 2 boulders in the gym for me. This one was super, super fun. As you can see, I was trying to find like a static method through this boulder, but the hold that we palm down to on the left there is dual text side up. So it really doesn't allow for a static sequence through there. And this boulder had a nice forced, like cool jump move. It wasn't just your classic scorpion jump, because you actually had to jump out of like a palm press. That boulder was really, really well set and super fun. And yeah, like I said, this is like, honestly, probably makes my Hall of Fame for just like all-time slab gyms. And I haven't even climbed here that much. I've probably had like maybe 5 or 6 sessions total, like in my life here. But every time I just remember being left with an impression that they set really good slabs in this gym. And they're always like super fun and creative, and usually have like a move or two that I have never experienced. So I was really having fun with this session. And there were also plenty of slabs to go around, which was nice. I didn't have to like skirt the rules at all for this session. And I had more than enough supply of slab and coordination boulders to go around for the session. And while I was feeling like quite good on the wall, especially in terms of my movement, I definitely was really out of breath throughout this whole day of training. Like I found my fingers felt solid, my movement felt good, nothing felt weak or stiff, but I was for sure feeling the elevation today. Like my setup is actually really sweet here. I'm staying a 5-minute walk away from this gym, which is very convenient. But actually, by the end of this 5-minute walk to the gym, I'm like out of breath. Like literally walking for 5 minutes at this altitude is taking a toll on me. So that's also why I was like surprised to have such a good feeling session, because I was out of breath by the time I got to the gym. And also, like, if you can tell, I'm kind of losing my voice at this point because my lungs are like working overtime. And I was chatting with some people at the gym today, and yeah, like my lungs like are kind of sore, honestly, and I can feel my voice going. But anyway, let's take a second to shout out this boulder, because this one I would say is also in the top 2 best boulders in the gym. This one and that blue slab were like 5-star boulders. This one was really cool. Obviously with the little toe catch and then the hand swap. Very, very cool sequence. Definitely the 2 best boulders in the gym in my opinion. And then yeah, also another really nice thing about this session, like especially this morning session, was that I obtained a nice level of confidence in these qubits. So for anyone who's missed the past few episodes, I have been climbing in the qubits by unparallel, and I guess this is like what, the 4th episode these have been featured in. So they're still quite new shoes. And the reason that I say I've gained confidence in these shoes is not like based on the design of the shoe. I can tell already that I'm really gonna like how these shoes function when they hit their prime. But the reason I say I gained confidence in these shoes is I was like really worried actually that I am not gonna properly be able to break these in time by the comp. But even just today, like in this morning session, climbing on all these slabs and all these volume smearing boulders, I could feel the shoes are starting to soften up and are more sensitive, and I can feel volumes and I have more confidence. And yeah, and we're still like a week and a half out from comp day. So I basically had like some mental confirmation that these shoes are going to be super good for Vail, and probably actually in like perfect condition. I think I timed it. I was like just in the nick of time when I started breaking in these qubits, and they should be super, super solid for comp day. I think they'll be just soft enough to like really have confidence on my volume smearing, but I think that they also will still have a nice level of relative stiffness to trust like these small footholds. And already this shoe is feeling like a good soft stiff hybrid and like a jack of all trades shoes, because I think it was probably in the Qubit review I said this. I am not someone who likes to bring like 2 pairs of shoes onto the mat. Also, let me quickly point out that I don't actually send this boulder here. I dab the mat, as you can see, but there were a lot of boulders to get to in this session, so I decided to just take a mock send of this boulder and move on. But anyway, yeah, I'm not someone who likes to bring 2 pairs of shoes onto the mat in a comp round and then have to switch, if I have like my slab pair of shoes or my steep pair of shoes. I like to have something that's like, 80% good at everything, instead of having 2 pairs of shoes that are like 100% good at one thing. And I just find it's like really mentally distracting to have to switch shoes on a 5-on-5 off round. And that's just personal preference. It really psychs me out, but a lot of the World Cup pros do it. So it definitely works. But yeah, I definitely like to have one shoe that I just wear all the time. And these qubits are definitely feeling like they could be that pair for me. So yeah, I was very relieved to gain confidence that these shoes will be broken in nicely by comp day. And honestly, another nice factor that are like kind of helping these shoes break in faster is just because it's starting to become summer. and shoes are definitely easier to break in and break in faster in the heat. Just because, you know, the rubber's like warmed up and almost softened up. And I think I remember a friend of mine telling me a while ago that he would go like really small with his climbing shoes in a way that he broke them in like without it being so painful, is he would like put them in the oven or something like for a few days before he actually wore them for the first time. I don't know if this is a good idea or not. I feel like this is what he said to me. He stuck his shoes in the oven, he like roasted them for a few times, and that helped break the rubber down a bit and soften it up, so it was easier to get on for the first time. But yeah, don't quote me on that. I could just be misremembering. But anyway, the relative heat outside is definitely helping these shoes break in a bit faster, which is very nice. And so now, if you have noticed a bit of a trend with the boulders we've been doing recently, they all seem to be quite powerful, and that is by design. To contrast our morning session of slab and coordination only boulders, we are now doing our Boulder Max Force session, where we just get on the powerful style boulders and physical style boulders. And this is just because like I usually feel much stronger in session 2 of day 1. And as you can probably tell so far, this gym is really, I mean, it was really good for the slab and coordination session. And it's also obviously really good for the Boulder Max Force session. I think there's a nice variety of styles in this gym actually. Definitely always enjoy my sessions here. But yeah, like we got a lot of classic American style boulders to go around, which is just perfect for Boulder Max Force. And I definitely always feel at home when I'm climbing in these American gyms because of this classic American style where we just have like, you know, rock climbing styles of boulders. And it's just about grabbing holds and being strong and you know, no volumes or technique required. I definitely have like grown up on this climbing style, especially coming from Ontario. We are known for having like kind of a lot of American style climbing in Ontario, especially back in the day when I started climbing. So as much as I try to work on my comp style bouldering, especially living in Montreal, and even when we were living in Germany, my body will always prefer this kind of climbing, and it will always be my strong suit. So I was really enjoying myself during this Boulder Max Force session, and I was also feeling like pretty decent, probably just as good as the morning session. I'd put the morning session at a 7.5 in terms of feeling good, and then this afternoon session probably the same, a nice 7.5, which is very surprising. Like I said, if I was to guess how I would be feeling before this day of training started, I would be guessing to be at like a 5 or 6 for both sessions. So it was really nice to be feeling not only like I was moving well on the wall, but also to be able to like grab all of these holds, all of these bad holds super well. And we like put down a lot of boulders, like a lot of flashes actually, which was quite nice in this session. And yeah, it's definitely nice to try and be flashing boulders, obviously, in our peaking phase of training while we are getting ready to compete. Because flashing boulders is obviously the name of the game on comp day. And here we are moving on to this boulder. And while I was scoping out the boulders in the gym before the day of training started, I had a guesstimate that this one looked like the hardest thing in the whole gym. Maybe there are like a couple of the roof boulders that I actually didn't get on today that might be harder, but at least for the boulders that I plan to get on in this day of training, this one looked like it would be the hardest, and it proved to be the case for sure. This shoulder sequence was really hard. and it was taking me a while to figure out a good sequence. Underneath this black volume, we have two kind of like Gastons. The left one is a bit better than the right one. It has a bit of bite, and the right one is like pretty slopey. So I'm trying to go to the better one first and then come into the slopier one as an undercling. But the feet are like not super set up nicely for this move. And so, yeah, it's on this try that I decide to go for what maybe, you know, initially seems like the harder sequence, but it ends up working a bit better here. And I do this like crazy shoulder move where I had to like thread the line of, okay, when should I actually let go of this position? Because it's obviously pretty painful on my shoulder. But like, is it actually okay enough to keep pushing through it? And that's always a scary line. But I feel like I have obviously like a lot of experience, like training of like, you know, I've been training for 16 plus years now. And I'm like lucky to have a pretty good intuition when it comes to these kind of moves. Like when can I push through a really intense sequence like that? Or when do I have to let go and drop off for fear of injury? And it's not too often that I'm in like a sort of static-ish position like that, where I end up picking up a tweak because I push through it too hard. When I tweak myself, it'll usually be like jumping into a position or like having an accidental slip or something like that. And yeah, it just takes time to build that kind of intuition. So anyway, here we are with the last boulder of this day of training. At the time I'm recording this, I haven't done day 2 yet, so we'll jump into that shortly. But yeah, like especially after I just finished this day of training, while it went quite well, I now feel really tired. It definitely takes a lot out of you to try and like train at elevation when you're not used to it. So I gotta rest up for tomorrow's day of training, and let's jump into that right now. Hello again. Here we are back for day 2 of training, and we are back at movement. So if you noticed, this morning session of bouldering is going to be quite nice because we don't necessarily have an agenda for this session. So obviously yesterday in the morning we did our slab and coordination session, and then in the afternoon we did our boulder max force session. But for this session, it is just simply listed as a boulder session, which means that I can climb whatever I would like. And I find that these sessions are also important to schedule in on the program as we're doing our peaking week, so that I can just sort of feel free and get on boulders that I can tell that I'm gonna vibe with, and just also sprinkle in some fun too. So we have just a nice short hour-long session of free-for-all bouldering. And for this session, I was thinking that we could potentially get on a few of the like hardest looking boulders in the gym that I decided to avoid yesterday, as we were just trying to shake off a lot of the rust. Even though I obviously felt a lot better than I expected to yesterday, I still wanted to pace myself and not go try all of these super physical, hard-looking roof boulders that we're about to get on. So I think I mentioned it earlier that these boulders in like the roof here, some of them looked like they would probably be the hardest in the gym, and it definitely proved to be the case. So not this boulder, but the next one we'll get on definitely felt like the hardest boulder in the gym, at least that I got on, and in terms of my climbing styles. So we found something that was harder than that pinchy one from the end of the last session. But yeah, I was also like quite not only interested, but motivated to get on these roof boulders, because obviously the boulders are quite long and physically intensive. So for one, it's always good for me to get on these super long physical pumpy boulders while we are adjusting to the elevation, because this is gonna like really work my fitness and really test it and really get it activated by like trying to be as efficient as possible and breathing heavy and breathing hard. This is gonna get my body just working hard really well and help get everything activated and acclimate faster to the altitude. And this is what I was also doing in Salt Lake City when we were climbing at the Boulder project, prepping for that North American Cup. I made sure that I got on a lot of the long, physical, like American style looking boulders to really help my body acclimate. And so I found getting on these 3 boulders here in the cave was like really valuable. And I was definitely getting pushed. Like about halfway through like every boulder in this roof, I just get hit with this wave of exhaustion. It's like not even pump necessarily, especially because of all of the endurance training we've been doing recently. I actually noticed I had a bit of resistance on my side, which was pretty handy. And I wasn't actually falling on these boulders in the roof because of like lactic acid buildup. It was actually more just from like sheer exhaustion and from like breathing hard and feeling like I was tiring out rather than pumping out. So that was pretty cool. I'm definitely glad we put in those endurance sessions. And while I was definitely like tiring out on these boulders, I still felt like I was able to push through it a good amount, which was also what the endurance training was for. To really be able to fight when my chest is tightening and I'm out of breath and my body's just exhausted. So by doing those endurance sessions recently, I basically trained myself to fight under these conditions. And yeah, I've been feeling like that training paid off. So anyway, here we've been trying this blue boulder, which, like I said, for me proved to be the hardest boulder out of all of these sessions that we did. And it's funny too, I think blue is technically supposed to be a grade easier than purple, but this thing was like unquestionably harder than anything else I did in this video. Definitely had to like be super efficient and fight my way through all these moves. And that was a pretty satisfying send and gave me a lot of confidence in my physical condition right now and my fitness. Especially because this is only day 2 of like acclimating to the altitude. I have never come to Denver and performed this well right off the bat in like the first 2 days of training. In terms of just how I've been moving and feeling physically, we definitely are at a really good starting point, which is relieving. And I have to credit the endurance training for this, I think. It just helped me, like I said, get used to being out of breath and being exhausted. And so I think it's helping me acclimate even faster. And like we still have another week to get used to the elevation too. So the idea is to just, not be feeling anything. And by comp day, just be feeling like we're at sea level. And that's the logic there. And I think we're on track to do that. So anyway, here we are trying another really hard boulder that actually proved to be way harder than it looked. I kind of underestimated this boulder when I was like scoping it out, but this second hold of this boulder is really bad and is like really slopey. And this boulder, I would say, is pretty anti-style. Like I mentioned this a lot in the videos recently, where this like sticky, friction dependent, slopey based boulders are usually not a good style of mine, but I've been working on it a lot recently and putting in a lot of reps. And it's been getting to the point where I've been feeling like I've been making a lot of progress and slowly eliminating the weakness, I think, which is nice. And yeah, I'm like really learning to properly place my body in like a nice straight line hanging down underneath these bad slopers. And That's something that I had to emphasize on that purple hold. But yeah, really like learning how those boulders function and operate has me been feeling really good about the style of climbing, and I feel like it's not as much of a weakness anymore. That being said though, that kind of boulder is still really hard to do in 5 minutes. While I feel like I've been leveling up on it in training, doing that kind of boulder in 5 minutes and managing like your skin condition and your sweat and brushing and the friction is definitely really stressful. So that's like the next step, is now I know how to climb the boulders, but to do that boulder in 5 minutes, I think I would really struggle with. And so anyway, this boulder that we're looking at here is gonna end up being the last boulder of the episode. And it's a really fun, actually cool blue tag slab with a pretty superhero last move actually. Like just a super powerful muscle up dyno. A pretty fun one. And then yeah, that's gonna wrap up our training here at Movement. I surprised myself with, completing a lot of the boulders in the gym. And so we might actually look at going to some other gyms in the area. I obviously booked my accommodation to be a 5-minute walk from Movement because I figured that the boulders in the gym were gonna last me a while, simply because the facility is so massive. And I definitely have more stuff to climb in the gym, but probably not enough for another week of training. So I'll probably end up going to some other gyms. And I'm actually pretty unfamiliar with the gyms around here, so I'll have to do some Googling. All I know is of the spot. I think that's near where I'm staying, but I've been told that there are some other good facilities, so I'll have to definitely check out what I should go visit. So anyway, at this point, I don't know where we're going to be climbing in the next episode, but tune in to find out. Insert Kaji video here.